Hi, I'm Ian McAllister.
And I'm Jamie Adams. And today on Brainwaves, we are joined by Mike Barnes of Who Dares Rolls. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hello.
How are you doing, sir? It's been a while since we saw you last on the Diced special we had last year.
I'm going to say it's been a long time. Yeah, I'm still ticking, it's still board gaming, and the world's still turning, so it's all good, really, isn't it?
Just about turning.
Well,
still going round and round.
Maybe anti-clockwise, but it's happening.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a new baby, and then...
Oh, congratulations.
Yes, new baby is in the world, so my life has pretty much been involved in changing nappies and dealing with that stuff. Just what I needed at my time of life.
Ah, absolutely. You got to have some excitement.
Exactly.
All the time. Yeah, life would be dull otherwise.
Exactly.
Good level of optimism as well, I like it. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about Who Dares Rolls.
Who Dares Rolls? Well, we will. We've been around forever. I class ourselves as the board game's dirtiest little secret because no one really knows about us. But yeah, in fact, I looked earlier today and we are celebrating, I think it's going to be our 6th year. We've somehow managed to survive 6 years doing media and yet no one actually following or watching us. So that's quite impressive work, really, isn't it? It's an achievement on its own. But yeah,
You've got to do it for yourself, really.
Exactly. It started as exactly that. It started as just something I started playing board games, and I was like, you know what? I at the time there was like 3 podcasts and like just Tom Vassell sat in his shed, so it was easier to join that party and do it. So yeah, I just started doing it, and it's just a thing now. It's just a thing I do, just for my own personal gratification, I think. But yeah, I've been doing it that long. You kind of keep doing it, but I've started doing a bit more YouTube these days. So and just playing games still. So it's fun. It's what we do as a hobby.
That it is.
So yeah, keep yourself busy. So yes, that's Who Dares Rolls. So basically, we do YouTube, we do podcasts, we do written reviews, we do all sorts of stuff with our own particular slant on it. Often, usually rudeness takes part. May contain adult content.
Very good.
Fantastic. And thank you, Mike will be joining us for today's episode of Brainwaves, bringing you the best in board game and tabletop gaming news. Here are the headlines for the week beginning the 5th of August 2019. Cool Mini or Not rebuilds board games to be stronger, faster, smarter. Spiel de Jahres takes flight. And 2 giants of the tabletop scene pass away. All this and more on this episode of Brainwaves.
Just before we get to this week's headlines and news, we'd like to add a wee correction for the last episode of Brainwaves, Brainwaves 32. We said that Satine Phoenix was still the Dungeons & Dragons community manager. That is actually wrong. She held the post till early this year, but is not currently the community manager. Apologies to the current community manager and Satine Phoenix for that wee mistake. We're starting with a bit of sad news this week as 2 giants of the tabletop scene have died. Richard H. Berg and Mike Brunton. Richard Berg is a game designer, actor, composer, director, writer, rock singer, attorney, communications consultant, and apparently also worked for the IRS for a small while. He's known by some as the Pope of wargaming, and is designer or co-designer of over 140 published games and expansions, according to Board Game Geek. He also designed the famous, or perhaps infamous, depending on how you look at it, campaign for North Africa, which has a 10-foot board and a playtime as listed as 1,500 hours, with a full complement of 10 players. That's 5 per side, and a bunch of strangely detailed rules, Italian units requiring extra water supplies due to eating pasta, apparently. That kind of thing. Just a very detailed designer. War games were completely his thing, and his final game called Big Apple is due to release in 2020 about city building in New York City. And Mike Brunton also has passed away recently. He was renowned in gaming circles for his work with Games Workshop, specifically the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition. He started TSR UK with Imagine magazine, moved on to D&D supplements, and then on to DW in 1986. He edited White Dwarf and wrote for several supplements and modules, including the renowned Empire in Flames and Realm of Chaos. I've tried to run Empire in Flames a couple of times and always got caught up about halfway through. But yeah, he was recently working on the director's cut of Enemy Within that's coming out for WFRUP 4th edition and Cubicle 7. And they put out a statement also saying how sad they were to hear of his passing and the shock to the team. Everyone at Brainwaves passed on their condolences to Mike and Richard's family and friends at this sad time.
Here's a little nugget of news to get you interested. CMON, or CMON, well, they're CMON now, aren't they? They've changed their name, apparently.
I did read on Twitter that people were saying that it's not meant to be CMON, it's meant to be Come On.
Yeah.
But whatever. Cool many or not.
CMON, I'm going to say that. Launches a smart board tech. The Teburu? Someone would pronounce this properly.
Teburu, maybe?
Teburu. Joint venture between CMON and Explored, a games console that integrates physically and virtual worlds. And apparently Japanese for table is Teburu. Teburu.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Oh my god!
Hey.
So yes, it's a wireless. It sits on your table. It's like a wireless thing, and you play. I think Zombicide's the first announced game they've done for this, and it essentially has all the rules and integrated, all kind of built into this bit of software. And even the dice have got tech in them, like smart dice.
Yeah.
One thing that ever rid me on this is it's going to stop people cheating. Because you put your figure down and it kind of says, oh yeah, you've done that, you've done this, and it does all the rules, all the almost GM and all the rulebook sort of maintenance beneath the scene, all for you. So you're essentially just moving bits of plastic around on a virtual board, kind of is how this is doing it.
Yeah, basically, there's a little bit of a video on CMON's site right now about this, and effectively, like the plastic minis don't have anything in them, but there'll be little colored circles you get in a lot of board games will be in that box, and they'll have RFID chips at the bottom, and that's how the game will communicate with the pieces. Now, the point about cheating is kind of interesting because I was chatting to some people on Twitter about this, and one thing that someone pointed out was, will it have room to basically be kind? You know, when like you're playing through that first game. When you're playing through that first game or someone wants to take back a turn, something like that. I hope that's being considered because that's quite a common thing that people do when they're teaching a game. It's all right. You don't have to. Don't worry about your decision. Just make one and see what happens. And then you can take it back or that kind of thing.
It brings us many questions around it.
Many questions.
There's many questions around it. I mean, obviously they've not released it. I don't believe they've released a price for this item yet. It's going to Kickstarter. I believe,
not yet.
Not yet.
Sometime next year.
I think next year is when it was quoted as being.
Yeah.
Anyone have any opinions on this? I'm sure there may be something out there.
Strong opinions.
I'm sure there are plenty of opinions. I'm sure the Twitterverse, at the very least, has exploded.
There's been that usual sort of like kickback of tech being introduced into board games. Now, I've got no particular problem with things like companion apps and things like that. I think they're really cool, and I've played with some. I played with something in my Gloomhaven campaign that's just a third party, and I've played games with the apps integrated, like the XCOM board game. Mm-hmm. They're really good, and I think they're really interesting. Having like an actual platform, like a physical platform, but essentially a games console that you have to play certain games, that's a new step. And I do wonder how people are going to react to it. And like you say, the price point is going to be a killer. If this is like the same cost as a Switch, like a Nintendo Switch or something, you're going to have to ask some serious questions about what that is. And like bits and pieces of the tech have been tried before by other companies, like Smart Dice have been tried before and have failed, because getting a dice to be balanced and have a battery in it and be rechargeable, that's a really hard technology problem. That is a really difficult technology problem. Whether they're up to it or not, I don't know.
I think another potential worry that might be is rapidity of games on release. So the first game that's going to be released is Zombicide Evolution Las Vegas. Yeah. So it's Zombicide. People know what to do. They know how to play. It's a game that people know. Fine, more games are going to come out. Of course they will. They want to make this a viable console.
Yeah.
How quickly are they going to be able to do this? And I think that's where it's going to live or die. It's fine to get one. It's fine to get one to get everyone in.
Yeah, basically, you're talking like what's the software lineup for it, effectively. Basically, like
I hate to use the word. I really hate using the word. But what is the roadmap for releases?
It's a good word.
It's a fair point. It's a fair thing to talk about. By the time this podcast goes out, there will be actual opinions about it, because this podcast is going out just after Gen Con, and CMON are showing it off there. But I mean, I am extremely skeptical. I've watched Kickstarter right from its early days, and some of the really big failures have been technology Kickstarters. Yep. Because making one of a thing is really easy. Making 10,000 of that thing in China is a completely different problem. And CMON have got experience, obviously, in the board gaming arena, but
not in tech, as far as I'm aware. Really, no.
No.
I'd be interested to see, because I mean, I came from the video game sector. I did work for Nintendo for many years, and the key focus on always that was they used to sell the consoles at a loss, because once you had one of those boxes under someone's TV in their house, you were guaranteed that they were going to buy your software, and that's where you make your money.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how the business model weighs up on this, whether they are going to take a hit on this to get it out as a widespread, or I mean, yeah, I don't know. No. I mean, yeah, the industry, the board game sector, the hobby sector is very split on that anyway. I know there's a lot of people very, very sort of furiously against it. So it'll be interesting to see how this one pans out.
Well, it is awards season still. It is still rolling around, and it is the Spiel des Jahres Awards time to shine. The Spiel des Jahres for this year is Just One by Ludovic Rowdy and Bruno Sauter, published by Repost Productions, which beat out LAMA, or Llama, and Werewords. Congratulations to Just One. As well as the Spiel Award, there was the Kenner Spiel, was also awarded on the same day, which is the connoisseur's choice of game. And the winner for that was Wingspan by Elizabeth Hargrave and published by Stonemaier Games, who beat out Carpe Diem, the new Stefan Feld game, and Detective. Now, the Kinderspiel, the Children's Game Award, was announced at the end of June and was won by Valley of the Vikings, a Haba game from Marie Fort and Wilfried Fort.
Yeah, the Spiel des Jahres is always an interesting award because it's never like, it's not always like the hardcore gaming audience that it's catering to. It's thinking about, well, specifically mostly sort of it's a German sort of public award, almost like what will appeal to the sort of German board game buying public, which is much bigger than like the British board game buying public. And yeah, it's always a little bit lighter in tone and touch, so it's interesting. It's always interesting to see what it awards. And I think they take I remember from our piece on this last year, they take particular care with like making sure that the rule books are good and straightforward and easy to understand. Any thoughts on the winners, Mike?
You know what? Just One I've not played, so I have no idea. I've
not played any of them.
I only played Wingspan literally the weekend just gone, and I was left resoundingly meh. The whole fair. It was all right, but so I don't know. I mean, they're all probably pretty solid games, but it's not exactly setting my world on fire. But it is. Nope. Maybe I'll look at Just One. Maybe there's something I can play with the kids.
The Spiel Award itself is usually focused more towards everyone, more towards families, and a game that everyone can play. Whereas the games you said that might set the world on fire is your Wingspans, your Detectives. Your Carpe Diem, it's a game by Stefan Feld. Oh, well, the reputation of Stefan Feld. Wingspan was doing the rounds. For months, everyone's been going crazy about Wingspan. Yeah. And Detective was, I believe that's the Ignacy Cevicek?
Yes.
Yeah. Portal
Games. Yeah, Portal Games. And there we go. And that's another app integration.
Yes, there is on that, yeah.
Very, very heavy app integration.
So I don't know if that's the first game to have, at least a nod. They may have app integration. Please don't quote me on that. But it's, it is something. It is notable. Of course you will, Ian. So yes, well done to all those winners.
Yes.
Indeed, well done.
And with the headlines over and done with, onwards to the rest of the news.
Sticking somewhat with a digital theme in this week's Brainwaves, we've got a couple of bits of digital board game news for you. The Terraforming Mars digital studio has unfortunately shut. This is Lucky Hammer Studios. They made Terraforming Mars and the unreleased game Mansions of Madness Mother's Embrace, which was a sort of inspired by Mansions of Madness, the board game, but not like straight copy of the board game mechanics. They had some financial woes, both from issues with publishing partners and underwhelming revenue from some VR projects, which led to the decision. A joint statement from Dom Russi and Marc-Antoine Pinard, owners of Lucky Hammers. We are working very hard at making sure all of our employees can find a new home or studios where they will be able to keep expressing their creativity and the art of making games. We organised a get-together for employees with all the major studios in Montreal to assure a smooth transition and continuity. Sad to hear of a studio with doing such a big board game conversion shutting down like this, but yeah, it just goes to show that all these, you still need to be making money from these digital board game conversions, and margins are pretty tight on this kind of stuff. And we've also got an interesting little tidbit that Bezier Games are releasing a sort of try before you buy scheme. I've had a wee look at the YouTube video, which we will link to. But basically, they've released a free, for now, app version of their game, their new game, Silver. So you can learn the game through a tutorial in the app, and the full rules are in there as well. You can play against an AI opponent before playing your friends with a physical version, and that physical version will be out at Gen Con, so people will have it in their hands by the time this cast goes out. And this is a really interesting idea, I think, and I'd actually like to see more companies doing this kind of thing and using things like Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia to give people a bit of a taste of their games, sort of digital taste of their games. I've always found it quite a different experience playing on Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator, but at least you could try like Trudvang Legends or some other big Kickstarter before you make that commitment. Maybe they don't want you doing that though. Who knows?
Well, yeah.
Where put your tinfoil hats on now.
I think there are a few games, and again, this is few and far between, and some of it's slightly anecdotal, but there are some games that do go in the middle of their Kickstarter campaign or their crowdfunding campaign. Other crowdfunding sites are available to go, we have a copy on Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator. Yeah. Here's a link to it. Why don't you try it? Now, again, this is, a handful. I'm not proclaiming myself an expert on crowdfunding in any shape or form, but I know that it is a thing. But I don't think we've seen before this is the full game.
Yeah.
And you get to learn it, and then you get to see if you like it. This is it in its early stages, maybe. Because as we know, things change still during a Kickstarter campaign. Yeah. Even after.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea, really. Allow you to try the app, especially also if they sell out at Gen Con, they can still point people towards the app. Like maybe there's a newsletter sign up in there as well, that kind of thing. It's kind of an interesting idea. Any thoughts, Mike?
It is. I think generally the tasters of stuff before it releases kind of quite a cool idea. I mean, if you could physically do it, I don't know so much, but yeah, it's. I mean, again, you've still got to run into the problems of the app police. But I mean, I think it's a good idea. It gives people anything that gives someone access to it potentially has got a chance for a wider appeal.
Yeah,
great. I mean, if you're playing it on the bus and someone, what have you got there? Oh, I'm playing this, and especially if it's free, they can download it, and anything that will get someone else who maybe doesn't play board games. Playing board games is a good thing. Yeah,
and everyone needs to stand out now. There's like so many releases. Like, well, we're going to talk about a little bit later. There's going to be thousands of releases coming out over Gen Con and Essen. So, yeah, it's an interesting way to stand out. I've been keeping an eye on an interesting looking Kickstarter that is funding right now for a documentary about the inmates of American prisons playing Dungeons and Dragons and the dangers of doing so. It's a let's play that's going to be told from the perspective of inmates who have waged legal battles for the right to engage in gaming rehabilitation inside prisons. For the most part, RPGs are banned in US prisons. Some wardens claim games are demonic and foster fantasies of escape, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, you should read up on the Mothers Against Dungeons and Dragons and the 1980s Satanic Panic and all that jazz, because that's fascinating stuff. But incarcerated players still band together to battle monsters, overcome obstacles in virtual worlds, and importantly, RPG tables can bridge racial divides inside prison. Inmates often say that these games are rehabilitative and helping them prepare for life on the outside. And I've read an article recently about this, of fascinating lengths they go to basically make their own dice, because dice are banned inside prison. So the ways they go around making sort of random number generators from what they have to hand. Fascinating stuff. We'll link to the Kickstarter and that article if I can find it again in the show notes. So this is created by Elizabeth DeClear, who has over 10 years experience in true crime media. The campaign ends on the 14th of August and is asking for $60,000. And yeah, I might actually pledge this one myself, because it's a fascinating thing, really. I'd love to hear about sort of gaming being used in rehabilitative ways. What do we think, gents?
The thing that really stood out from that, apart from it does sound very fascinating, is they banned dice. What?
Yeah.
Is it for gambling?
They banned dice for gambling. I've heard not only dice, but they also either dice or even use spinners. That they kind of home make and kind of and hide.
But also, like the article I read had people carving dice out of soap and all sorts, doing like pretty innovative stuff, like considering how little they have access to. And yeah, like Jamie says, spinners and all sorts of things to make the random dungeon generators. And yeah, I'll have to find the article again, because I think it might actually be the same woman by the looks of some of the graphics on the Kickstarter.
I believe it is, and.
Yeah. Jamie, you've been very excited about a thing.
I'm excited but also tinged with a hint of trepidation, but maybe that's just me. There was an announcement recently from Games Workshop and Big Light Productions, which is a company behind such TV programs as The Man in the High Castle, and Medici and Ransom, just some of the shows that they do. But there's an announcement that Games Workshop and Big Light Productions are now joining forces, or they're working together to create a TV show based on one of the Warhammer 40,000's most famous individuals, and that is Gregor Eisenhorn, who is a member of the Inquisition in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Now, Big Light Productions creative director Emily Feller is serving as executive producer on the project alongside Frank Spotnitz, who is also exec producer, and he will be acting as showrunner on the project as well. Frank Spotnitz's credits, some of them include The X-Files and The Man in the High Castle, so there is a very, he's bringing a lot of good experience, and it's with a very good record of the kind of things that is Warhammer stock and trade, pretty much. Crypto pseudo-fascism, I say pseudo-fascism, and really weird things that are unexplained. It is in development, this project, which, before anyone gets too excited, it's prior to production. It's nowhere in production yet, so development usually means that concept art is being made, script writing is still being done, an outline of what they actually want to do with it, because the Eisenhorn series, I believe, is 4 novels by Dan Abnett, who's written a lot for Games Workshop and also a lot for Marvel Comics. I believe he was instrumental in leading to the revival of the Guardians of the Galaxy as in the eyes of people. Yes, all this is being worked on right now because the Eisenhorn series is 4 novels and a good number of short stories that kind of weave in and out. So what they want to do with it remains to be seen. Now, as Ian said, I'm quite interested in this. I'm quite excited. I think Eisenhorn is a very well-written character in a very well-written series. It promotes the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It's not the unending slog of horror, war, death, and misery that most people think of when they think of Warhammer. It's slightly lighter, more civilian and more detective epic side to it. And a kind of easier way into that world itself.
Yeah, allow them to show off the world a little bit and explain a bit about it. Seems like a good move to me. I mean, there's so much coming to streaming these days through so many different channels, and a lot of companies are looking for new things, new blood to write about, new shows to make. So yeah, it seems like a smart move from GW to me. Like, get that out there, get some more people interested in your property, convert some of those into some gamers. Job's a good one.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I grew up on 40k as in my younger years, a lot of 40k. it is quite an extreme world, but yeah, I mean, I've not read any of the Eisenhorn stuff. Maybe they're gonna have to call it something different. It sounds a little bit like a Scandinavian detective show. Is the problem?
It does a little bit, doesn't it?
But,
maybe that's how you get a whole new series of new wave listeners. They're like, or listeners, viewers. They're like, oh, the Scandinavian noir. Wait a minute, this isn't Scandinavia.
What's this? Yeah, I mean, Game of Thrones kind of changed the whole TV world, really, with how big that was. And there is that vacuum to fill of some epic, big TV show. But my only concern is in development. I mean, this thing is not going to be cheap.
No, it is definitely not.
Significant world building going on. But yeah, though this alone, I mean, it's interesting. We've got Witcher coming from Netflix.
Yep.
I'm cautiously optimistic. The Expanse, if you've not watched that, it's fantastic.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it is good.
So yeah, I mean, if they do this and do this right, it could be something a bit special. But
But another thing is, if this does get, produced, if it does come out, and if it's a success, are we going to see more Warhammer 40,000, or even Warhammer Fantasy, or even Warhammer Age of Sigmar products come out, products, TV shows? Are we going to see perhaps Gaunt Ghosts, another Dan Abnett penned epic, but is it just sharp in space?
Yeah, we definitely. If it's successful, we definitely will. With Gen Con and Essen just around the corner, and thousands of releases, literally thousands of releases about to hit the release schedule, and a bunch of chatter on Twitter recently, we're asking ourselves, we're asking each other, can there be such a thing as too many games. What do you think, gents?
My wallet says yes. Everything else about me says, of course not.
My wallet and my shelving space says no.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, yeah,
Yes.
I tend to keep quite a small collection, but one of the things that prompted me to ask this question is I've been chatting with some people on Twitter about sort of a bit of anxiety amongst a lot sort of the reviewing community and sort of some people in general about there being like too many games out there, not enough, like it's harder to find the good games amongst the deluge of so many releases. I mean, Essen will have somewhere in the region of 1,000+ releases as it did last year. How do you find sort of the gems amongst that? And you can't really stop people making the game they want to make, whether that's a good game or a great game or a bad game. That's very subjective. And my personal opinion is I don't think there are. I think there's still a growth in the hobby, like quite a strong growth going on at the moment. There is a lot of games coming out, but one of the upshots of that is that you get to see more interesting sort of themes coming out of that as well, like things like Wingspan, more like in the RPG world, things like Starcrossed, that sort of stuff. People producing more interesting games as you see more and more games coming out, but other opinions are available, certainly.
I mean, I think the one thing we're missing, there's lots and lots of games coming out, is just maybe a bit more originality. We do have the danger tipping point of just recycling the same old stuff. Something's popular, so it kind of gets recycled. I mean, Hollywood does the same thing. But yeah.
I mean, see Zombicide Evolved that we mentioned earlier in the cast, for instance.
Exactly, yeah.
Legacy games. Legacy games is one kind of trend. And again, maybe that's a bit disparaging. And, some of them are a bit different, some of them are good. But a lot of games now are like, right, we're bringing out, a legacy version of this. And, okay, all your things will have meaningful choices. Let's see if it does. This, and Roll and Rights is another one. Okay, yeah. This past year has seen Roll and Rights more than I can count. And you're aware that there was a game released by, I think it was Queen Games, called Copenhagen.
Yes.
It's a wonderful kind of looks very beautiful game. Copenhagen has been out probably for less than a year, and Copenhagen Roll and Write was/is on Kickstarter already. And I'm going, fantastic, you've got that. You've got your finger on the pulse. Do you want to wait for a little bit before your game to cool? Before you go, right, here's its little brother.
It's a good point. I think games need time to breathe. It's like a fine wine. It needs to mature. And I think far too often, as to say, it's the danger of turning into a disposable hobby that stuff just doesn't get the time to find its legs. You get it, it's played, it's the hotness. Oh, the new hotness. It's gone. So I certainly myself in the last few years stepped right back from that sort of wild feeding frenzy that can happen. I kind of wait for the stuff to rise to the top of the pile, and you can kind of cherry pick at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thought there, to sort of wait sort of 6 months to a year down the line. Those games are mostly still available, and by that time, the sort of critical reception will be there. People will be chatting about it, and you can actually sort of form an opinion as to whether that game is for you or not. That's certainly what I tend to do. Like, I eventually bought Gloomhaven, for instance, but I didn't buy it I didn't like Kickstart it at all. I just waited for it to be available at retail, and it took me about a year to decide to buy that, because it's quite a bit of investment.
It's an outlay. But
yeah, it's an outlay.
But it's a good game.
So yeah, it took me about a year to decide to buy it, because the outlay, making sure I had people to play it with, all that kind of thing. And yeah, one of the good things about there being so many games out there is that there is very likely a game for you. If you're only going to have 2 or 3 games in your collection, or even one, it's very likely you will find a game for you. It's finding that game that is getting more difficult, much like Steam, for instance, where there are lots of good indie games on there. Discoverability, that's hard. That's really, really hard. And I suppose it's down to reviewers like ourselves to sort of shout about the small stuff as best we can. Yeah, I do think we need to be cautious as like sort of critics and reviewers and people with like some voice in the industry of like being like, oh my god, there's too many games. It feels a little kind of, I don't know, a bit disingenuous, and it's not something we can really control either. People are going to produce games to try and make money as companies, because that's just how it's going to happen.
It's not. I think it's trying to not come at it from the place of there are too many games and there should be less games. He goes, right, there are a lot of games being released. What does this tell us, and what do we think might be, ways for the industry to to maybe improve the overall quality of the games. Now, does that mean making less games? Possibly. Does it mean just, allowing more time for ideas to percolate, allow more testing? Again, possibly, but profits are a thing. And actually, as you said, trying, like we've been saying earlier, trying before you buy. Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator are a great example of games where you go on to, for example, Tabletop Simulator, and there is a huge database of games that some have just been released, some are really, really old, and you can download them, copies of them for it, and you can try them out. If you can find an online copy of the manual, try it out, see if it is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that kind of thing is great and allows people to sort of get a taster for games, even if they can't make to Gen Con or wherever where these things are being shown off. And yeah, I'd like to see more of that personally. One of the advantages and disadvantages of being a smaller viewer like myself is that I don't get sent a lot of games. So I can sort of help the smaller publishers try and get some sort of voice. And that is kind of sort of one of the mission statements of the Giant Brain. I don't know about yourself, Mike, with Who Dares Rolls. Do you sort of seek out the sort of smaller guys and try and help them up?
I have always been, when we first started, I always kind of was quite supportive of the UK designer, specifically, because the American designers are the big publishers, the big guys kind of get all the shout. Dice Tower will shout all day long, and there's no point in me competing against that.
No,
you ain't going to beat it. So yeah, I've always had a soft spot for supporting homegrown talent, even UK and Europe. Any small little designers are producing, especially something that's innovative and new, something that I've not seen before. Then I love finding that. There's that sense of discovery and finding something that you've not encountered before, or mechanism or game design. You go, wow, this is amazing, and then it gives you something, a bit of passion, something you can shout about. So yeah, I'm all for that.
I wrote a little article recently about sort of the fear of missing out and how that sort of drives a lot of the industry. I think it's just keep in mind when you are going around something like Gen Con or Essen, like there's a lot. The big publishers, they're going to be there regardless. You'll be able to get their games later on. You absolutely will. It's the smaller guys that need your help. So stop by the smaller stalls. See all those little small stalls sort of gathered together in one place, which tends to be what happens at a con like this. Give a couple of them a shot. See if they've got interesting things that you would like. Give them your support. Even just shout about them a little bit on social media or wherever. You don't need to actually give them money, but just give them a little bit of support. Can go an awful long way.
Well, it is almost time for the curtain to close on another audio journey that we have had today on Brainwaves. But before we go, just a little notice for you that amazingly, it is 15 years, count them, big 15 years since Ticket to Ride by Alan R. Moon was released by Days of Wonder and won the 2004 Spiel des Jahres. The game has sold over 8 million copies, and if you ask someone, what is one of the board games that got you into the hobby, a lot of people may go Ticket to Ride. It is usually near the very top of board games to introduce to people for the first time. It's a great, great game. And Days of Wonder have announced that they are going to be bringing out a 15th anniversary edition. It'll feature new plastic trains, and you might be going, Jamie, the trains are plastic. What are you talking about, you numpty? And I say, yes, but these trains are clear.
Well, translucent.
I'm so sorry, translucent.
They're coloured. Sorry. They're coloured clear plastic.
They are
translucent.
They are coloured but translucent, yes. There will be a special box sleeve, and there will be a 4-page retrospective booklet featuring the history and creation of the game. It'll be available in the United States on August the 9th, and hopefully in the UK and Europe a wee while after that, or hopefully very quickly. I never really had any beef with Ticket to Ride. I think it's a very good game. 5 years ago, they put out the 10th anniversary edition with the very nice looking, that was all nice. The trains were separate. Like every player's trains were a different kind of train car, so you could actually tell the difference by feel, for example, which might help, say, visually impaired gamers.
Yeah.
The 15th anniversary edition does look nice. It's another Ticket to Ride, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about too many games and more evergreen titles coming out and games hanging around for longer. And I mean, like it or not, that game has hung around for a very long time and it's still a good intro to the hobby. So yeah, congratulations, Ticket to Ride. So, Mike, thanks very much for coming on to the cast. It's been a pleasure having you on to chat about various things.
It's always a pleasure to catch up and chat to you, gents. Thank you very much.
Where can people
Thank you.
find Who Dares Rolls and yourself on the internet and things like that?
We're all over the place. So there's the site, whodaresrolls.com. That's quite easy to find us. So we're on YouTube now, on Twitter. Pretty much we're on everything is Who Dares Rolls, so it's quite easy. If you go to the main Who Dares Rolls site, pretty much there's links to everything from there, so you can go from that point.
Fantastic. And thank you all very much for listening. If you like what you've listened to, then the best way to help us out is to share the podcast and drop us a review and rating on iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at The Giant Brain, or on Instagram as Giant Brain UK. Facebook is The Giant Brain. Our main website with all our podcasts and articles is giantbrain.co.uk, and you can email us about anything in the show or anything else at giantbrainuk@gmail.com. Thank you very much. Goodbye.